Hi, this is Kimberly Morris at procrastistamper.blogspot.com, and this is my July 2013 Workshop of the Week number 1. Okay, the first project that we're going to make is this Ferrero Rocher 3 treat holder. There are 3 of those little treats inside here, and I'm going to start with a piece of pool party cardstock, and for my tag on this I have chosen to print out a tag from the Tags for All My Digital Studio download, and I'm just going to trim it out to get this tag. Okay, I have trimmed out the tag using my paper snips, and now I am going to take the Full Party cardstock and run this through the Big Shot. Okay, the die that I'm using for this project is the Big's Clear Oval Accent die, and this is clear through the top so that normally you could line up whatever you've decorated underneath and be able to see through it while you're cutting it. But all I want is the shape, so I'm just going to use this right side up. And when you're using a steel rule die such as this one, you're going to put one cutting plate down, you'll put your die down on your surface, put your cardstock over the cutting surface, and then you'll try not to hit your camera stand, and you'll place your second cutting pad on top and then run that through the Big Shot. When this comes out the other side, it'll probably kind of be stuck in the middle. You just take your thumb and pop it right out of there. In this next step, I'm going to take the die cut piece and use my Stampin Trimmer. I'm going to roughly line up the edge with the 2-inch line, and then I'm going to kind of fine tune and line up these little points. There's one point here, and then there's one right up here, and I'm going to line those up. They line up about with a 3/4 inch line. Then I'm just going to close my guide, run my score blade across there, and then turn it around and do the same thing on the other side, and that's what it should look like. For this next step, I'm going to take my scored piece and I'm going to run it through my Big Shot with an embossing folder. So I'm just going to close that in there. Embossing folders I put through with no tabs on my platform. Then I place a cutting plate, embossing folder, and then another cutting plate or cutting pad, and then run it through the Big Shot. Okay, the final steps to my project are simply to bend the pool party piece along the score marks, and we're going to take this little punch. This is from the Itty Bitty Shapes punch pack. It's the little scallop circle, and we're just going to punch a little circle on this side and then another circle approximately the same place on the other side. Set that aside, and then we'll punch a hole in the tag. And if you want a smaller punch, you can use a different one. This is going to be used on some other projects today, so I wanted to use this all the way through. Take some of your ribbon. This is the Crochet Trim. I cut it at about 6 inches. Set that aside. Then I just take my snail adhesive and I actually just run some little strips in the center and at each end in the middle scored section here. And I'll place my first little treat right in the center. I find it's easier to place them in the center. Press them down, don't squish the candy, but just press them down firmly into the snail and it should hold. And then you've got the third one. That part's done. And all you do is pull the sides up around it. Set your tag in the front. Run your ribbon through it. And this is why I like the Crochet Trim for this project, because all you have to do is just tie it in a simple single knot. Just pull that tight and trim the edges off at an angle. And then your little project is complete. This is the next project we're going to work on for this workshop, and the PDF with all of the instructions and dimensions and supplies for making all of these projects in this video will be available to you with a purchase of $50 using the hostess code that is on your screen. So I'm using the Label Love stamp set for this project, and it's featuring the Polka Dot Parade Designer Series paper because this month Designer Series paper is buy 3 get 1 free. This project is going to feature the Stampin Trimmer. I have cut my cardstock to size and now I want to score it. The Stampin Trimmer has a scoring blade and a cutting blade. So I want to score this card in half. So I'll just run my scoring blade across there. So I have my cardstock that's scored in half. I'm going to go ahead and fold it. Whenever you make a score, you should fold towards the bump. The bump is actually facing the bottom side of the paper, so that's why I folded it that direction. And I'm going to choose this for my front side. I want to make some more score marks, but I want them to make them sticking out from the front, so I'm going to do them on the back of my front panel of my card. So I'm going to line this up, just kind of wherever I feel like it. If I can line it up with a line down here on the bottom, that'll give me an even space that I can line it up with. Go ahead and just go over that a few times and then slide it up 1/4 of an inch, which is really easy when you've lined it up with one of those lines to begin with. And then you'll see that you have 2 score lines on the front. The next thing we're going to do is put a strip of designer series paper on there. Okay, so I have made these score marks, and here's my designer series paper. There are little polka dots on the back, and I want to use these big ones on the front. So I'm just going to use my snail adhesive and liberally apply some adhesive onto the back of that. And I'm actually going to use these little design elements to sort of line up my designer series paper across there. So it's a design element and it's kind of a cheat. Now the next thing that I want to do is put some more score lines down here. So I'll bring my Stampin' Trimmer back up here. Now you want the score lines on the back of this front panel, but in order for me to see where I want the score marks to land, I'm going to kind of judge about 1/4 of an inch on the front and just start a score line on the front, and then I'm going to turn it over. And then I'm going to find that score line on the back, line it up with the ridge in the little cutting strip, and go over that several times. And I'm going to slide it up about 1/4 of an inch again. So we'll just take it and put it right about there, put our cutting guide down, and score over that several times. And then we've got our 2 lines above and 2 lines below. Okay, the next step before I get too far is to take the paper piercer, and this is a little protective guide. Don't throw that away, keep that so you can keep yourself from poking yourself on your tool. I'm just going to put one hole near the edge, right about in the middle of that cardstock there. And this is the Stampin' Pierce mat underneath. Again, you want to put this on the end as soon as you're done with it so you can make sure you don't poke yourself. And the next thing we're going to do is string some baker's twine through that little hole. Okay, I'm going to use my craft and ribbon scissors and cut off about 24 inches of the baker's twine. Set that aside. And I want to string this through from the back of the card, but the hole is really tiny, so I'm going to use a little cheat. This is what's called a floss threader. It's a little tiny nylon loop with a stick at the end. So you put the stick through the end, or through the side where you want your ribbon or string to go through. Put the end of your string through the loop and pull the loop through, and then the end of your string is through the front of the card. And all I'm going to do is even out the sides of this, and then I'll tie it in a bow right over here. So I've got a little kink right here that's naturally in my baker's twine, so I'm just going to go ahead and use these craft and ribbon scissors and cut it just that long. Okay, and for the last step, I'm going to add the Happy Birthday to You greeting from the Label Love stamp set, and this coordinates with the Artisan Label Punch. So this is a clear mount set, so I have already mounted the index sticker to the back of the image. So when I use a clear mount stamp, all I need to do is take one of my clear acrylic blocks and mount this. I like to rub the block against my jeans and just exhale gently on the label of the clear mount stamp. Press down very firmly, hold for 3 to 5 seconds, and then your image should be all stuck on there. Take your Stampin Mist ink pad. This is an old felt, linen covered felt ink pad, so it sounds like I'm being kind of rough with it. I like to tap, kind of twist and tap to load the ink up on the image. With the firm foam ink pads that you can order from Stampin' Up! Now, you don't need to do anything other than a light touch, which I'll show you on a different project. This is the Artisan Label Punch. You need to unlock it first. Then you can line up your image underneath, punch that out, and then we'll put that on our project using some Stampin' Dimensionals. Okay, when I'm using my Stampin' Dimensionals, I like to take my paper snips and cut them in half because they last longer. So I'm going to use 1/2 of a Stampin' Dimensional on the top back of this piece and 1/2 on the bottom back of this piece. And there's a reason to space these out from each other and to leave the center open. That's because we're going to put this over our ribbon, or baker's twine in this case, and we want to press that down. That way we can leave that ribbon to float freely, and we can sort of slide the bow, just slide it from the front and from the back at the same time, and you can move that bow over if you decide that you want it a little farther to one side or another. And there's your completed card. It's nice and flat and easily mailable, and this will coordinate with either the medium white envelopes or the crumb cake medium envelopes. Okay, this is our third workshop project, and it's going to feature this little sunflower from the Best of Flowers stamp set. And the reason that I like to feature these stamp sets is there's a special deal with the Best of 25 Years stamp sets. For every 6 that you collect, you can choose a free stamp set up to $14.95 in value when you collect the little 25-year stickers that you'll find inside each one. And these are going to come out once a month. This one came out, I have it numbered 3, it came out in March of this year. So January through December of this year there'll be a new Best of 25 Years stamp set. So I'm going to take this clear mount sunflower out, and I showed you previously how I mount those. I just exhale on the label, and I actually rub the acrylic against my jeans to sort of get kind of a static cling to it. And you can always press your stamp from the bottom if it's not quite stuck firmly to your block. So I'm going to then take my cardstock, which I've already cut and scored, and once again with a minimum order of $50 during the month of July, using that hostess code that you'll see below, you can have all the instructions, dimensions, and supplies that are needed for all of these workshop cards. Okay, I have folded over my card, and I'm just going to stamp sunflowers all the way across the front of this card, from the bottom left to the top right. Prior to the next step, I want to clean my stamp. So this is the Stampin Scrub. You get one side wet, so I'm going to spray on it with my Stampin Mist. You just scrunch your stamp along in there to clean it, and then you scrunch it along this dry side to dry it, and then you're ready to use your next color. For this next part, I'm going to use the same stamp and the Smoky Slate Ink Pad, and this is one of those firm foam pads I was telling you about. You really just barely touch the stamp to it, and it inks it up quite nice. So I am going to stamp this image on my little piece of Whisper White cardstock, and I'm going to use the 1 1/4 inch scallop punch to punch that image out. And you might notice I stamped the image sort of close to the edge of the little scrap of paper, because I'm going to use another corner of the paper for something else. So I just wanted to leave some area on the edge that I could use. Next, I'm going to be using my Daffodil Delight ink pad. But before I use that ink pad, I'm going to need to clean my stamp. I'm just using the Stampin' Scrub off the screen, just like I showed you before. And now my stamp is all clean and ready to go again. So I'm going to ink it up. You can hear I'm tapping. That means you know that this is one of those linen-covered felt pads. And when I stamp this image down, I really only want the center of the image sort of close to an edge of this cardstock, so that I can use this little itty bitty shapes punch. You've seen this before. Unlock it, line that up with the center of the flower, and then you're going to punch that out and layer that onto this piece. To layer this image, I like to use my mini glue dots, and to do that, just expose one of the adhesive dots, press your item to it. I like to twist just a little bit as I'm pulling it off to separate it, and then you just set it over the area you want it adhered. Then I'm going to take my paper snips and cut in from each little indent of the scallop towards that center piece. And as long as you don't cut as far as the Daffodil Delight center that you adhered on top of that, then you'll be fine. You shouldn't be cutting any of your petals off. So just keep doing this all the way around your flower. For the next step of this project, we're going to use a stamp from the Happy Day stamp set. I'm going to use the Hello There stamp. And I actually only want to use the word hello. This is going to go on your other little piece of Whisper White cardstock. We'll use that side there, right there. And you can either use the Smoky Slate Stampin' Write marker to just only color the hello part of the image, or you can use your ink pad, and I'll show you a trick I like to use because it's a lot faster to me than using the marker, and you get also a more consistently clean looking image. So I turn the ink pad to its side, and I just look at the stamp from the side and just touch it on there, and this works really great with the firm foam ink pads, and just check and see that you've gotten it all inked up. And you can see that I've only inked the word hello. Go over that a couple more times just to make sure I get it nice and clear. And you can use a Stamp-A-Majig for this part if you want. I'm going to stamp hello towards the bottom of this image. I like to line up my wood mount stamps as close to the parallel to the edge of the wood block as I can get it. So it usually comes out fairly straight if I just eyeball it using the edge of my block. So then I'm going to come back in with my Daffodil Delight ink pad, and I'm going to sponge around the edges. To sponge the edges of this piece, I'm going to use a Stampin' Sponge, and this is actually, I think, 1/4 of a sponge. You get 3 of them in a pack, so if you cut them in 4, then you'll have 12 little sponge pieces. And I like to take a little label punch and punch out a curly label punch with cardstock in the color that I am using on the sponge, and then that way I can staple that there. Not only do I have somewhere to hang on to, I also know what color it is, and I don't have to rinse it out or get a new one each time because I'm not sure which color it is. So all I'll do is take the sponge, dab it on the ink pad, and then brush from the front to the back, and I do this all the way around this piece. So now you have your sponged piece with hello on it, and you've got your little flower with the center adhered. Now just take all those petals and just sort of bend them up towards the center of the flower. It'll give them a little bit of a actual 3D look. And we'll use a Stampin' Dimensional. I'm just going to use a whole one on this because it's a small piece and it's going to go directly in the center. Peel off the backing, and then I'll place this towards the top of my hello piece. The next step is going to be to put this strip on there, which is where our little layer of the flower is going to go. And what I've decided to do, just to make this easy, you don't have to have any special tools, is just rip the cardstock on all 4 sides. Just rip it towards you so that the torn area that's the different layers will be facing towards you. And you can rip this to whatever size you want. I think this is a good size for my strip. I'm going to turn it over and take my snail adhesive and just run some on there. When I place this on the card, I'm going to want to place it far enough to the edge to where I have room to put this so that it's not sticking over to the side of the edge. So I'm gonna say maybe about there is good for me. Now when you put this piece on, you can put it on over the Coastal Cabana piece like I've done, or if you like it better this way, you can slide it over, or you can put it at the bottom, however you like to do it. I'm going to put mine right here. So I'm going to take my Stampin' Dimensionals and do the same thing that I did previously, which is to take my my paper snips and cut 2 dimensionals in half. Because this is a bigger piece, I want to put a half of a dimensional in each corner. And you'll want to use either dimensionals or mini glue dots, because they're going to lift that image up a little bit over this strip. If you use just a regular flat glue like snail adhesive or a liquid glue, when you put your piece down, your eye is actually going to kind of see it bend over that piece, and it just doesn't look quite as nice and professional. And there we have that, and all we need to do now is put a rhinestone on there. The way that I like to use my rhinestones is to take my paper snips. You kind of sort of have to, it's almost like digging underneath the rhinestone, because you want to make sure that you get the sticky part too. Sometimes the sticky part does not come up with it. You want to make sure you get that. So you've got to get all the way underneath it and then place it where you want it. I've chosen to put it down in the corner. You can put yours down here if you want, or down in the corner of the whole card itself, and just press down where you want to stay, and your card is complete. And once again, we have a card that is fairly flat. There's not a whole lot of height to it, so you can put it in the mail and mail it for just a single postage stamp. And if you would like to take advantage of the Designer Series paper sale that's buy 3 get 1 free during the month of July 2013, this is just an alternate idea, using Designer Series paper underneath this layer instead of using the solid cardstock. This is the last card of this week's workshop, and it features the Happy Day stamp set, which we used the hello from this image on our previous card. This card features baked brown sugar, that's the color of the cardstock, as well as the first ink pad that I'm going to use. This is my wood mount stamp from the Happy Day stamp set, and again, this is a firm foam pad, so all you need is a light touch on it. No banging, twisting, or anything is required, and I think you can probably see how wet that image is. I'm going to start with an image down in the corner of the front. Tap a few more times, just lightly. I'm going to shift my image over just a little bit and then shift it back, then shift it over, and then end with an image that I've shifted back. The next step is to put this pennant onto the card base. I'm just going to take my paper snips and cut from one edge into the center, and then from another corner into the center, and just sort of go back and forth until your cuts meet. It doesn't have to be perfect. You can measure it if you really want it to be perfect, but it really doesn't matter. And then I'm going to adhere this with snail. This is where the grid paper comes in handy. So I just put my adhesive on the back here. If I line up my card with the bottom of the grid paper and then pick a line to line it up with on one side, then I can kind of look over and see, is it about lined up with the other side? That looks good enough to me. And then you can get that fairly straight across your card. The next thing I want to do is take the same image that I used on the card front, and I'm going to ink that up in Crisp Cantaloupe. Once again, it's a firm foam ink pad, so just a light touch is required. But I don't want to stamp this on there full strength. I want it to be lighter, so I'm going to stamp it down firmly and evenly on my grid paper, and then I'm going to exhale onto the surface of the stamp. Be careful and don't smash it against your lips and get a new color of lipstick. Just exhale, and then stamp down in the center of this very vanilla cardstock, and you can see it's much lighter. That's going to give me just the amount of color that I want. Okay, so I've swapped out ink pads. I'm going to be using the baked brown sugar again. Just lightly tap against the firm foam ink pad to get the entire greeting inked up, and then you'll just line this up approximately in the center of your image. You can use the Stamp-A-Majig if you like. and just stamp it down on there. And then we are going to use framelits to cut this image out. For this next step, I'm going to be using the Big Shot and the Labels Collection framelits. So I'm going to choose the second largest size. When using your framelits, you're going to want to use your multi-purpose platform with all the tabs closed. You're going to want to set down one cutting pad, then put down the item that you want to cut out. Place your framelit over that and line it up where you want it. If you're having problems with this moving, you can put a post-it note over it. Just overlap the post-it note over the edge of the framelit and onto the cardstock, and it will hold it steady as you run it through your Big Shot. So this is what you end up with. Just pop it out of there and you have your die cut piece. And the rest of the card is very simple to finish. From here I like to use some mini glue dots and just put them along the center back of this piece. And the reason I want them on the center back is I don't want to glue the tips down, because then you get that rounded look over your underneath layer like I was mentioning before with the other card. So to figure out where the center is, that looks good enough. And then just stick it down. And then we need one of the baked brown sugar flowers. And this punch is another of the punches from the Itty Bitty Shapes punch pack. There are 3 shapes in there, and we've used 2 of them on our workshop cards today. So I'll lock that and set that aside. To put my little flowers on, I also like to use mini glue dots because they just fit perfectly right on there. And again, just sort of twist to the side as you pull them off. This flower will go up here, and then we'll put another couple of flowers down here. You see how fast this can go with the mini glue dots because you're not trying to add glue somewhere. Press them down, and to finish the card we're going to put some Rhinestone Jewels, one in the center of each of the flowers. Again, get your tips of your scissors underneath the self-adhesive that's under the rhinestone. Make sure you pick up that adhesive with it, don't just pick up the rhinestone off of the adhesive. Press that down, and then I like to go through, you can just get your fingernails under there or the tips of your scissors, whatever works, and just sort of pull them up. Then you can press them back down if they're sticking up too much. But again, even though this card has some dimension and texture, it's still very flat and very mailable with a regular first class postage stamp and no extra postage needed. And if you would like to take advantage of the Designer Series paper sale, this is the same card, just a little bit of sponging added around that element with the Soho Subway Designer Series paper underneath and some coordinating colors on the flowers. So as I mentioned previously, if you spend at least $50 with me using the hostess code below during the month of July 2013, you will get emailed to you PDFs with instructions and measurements and supplies needed for all of these projects. In addition, if you spend at least $75 with me, you will get the PDFs plus one each of the finished projects, except if they're 3D, you won't be getting like the little candies in it, and they won't be completely assembled. They'll be mailed flat, so that you may have some assembly to do with those. If you place an order of at least $100 during the month of July using that hostess code, you will get the PDFs, you'll get one each of the finished projects, plus for each project I'll give you a prep pack with everything cut, scored, and ready to go so that you can make one of each of the projects yourself. And when you spend $150 during the month using the hostess code, then you will get the PDFs, you will also get one each of the finished projects, you will get a prep pack for each project so you can make one of each of them. You will also get to choose hostess benefits, up to $25 in free merchandise of your choice. So I hope you will take advantage of my Workshop of the Week bonuses using my hostess code, and until I see you next week, happy stampin'!